Okay, here we're beginning a video series of AUC Section 265 for communicating internal control related matters identified in an audit. And with this video, we'll just go through the scope of this section and the objectives of what we're trying to achieve by complying with this AUC section in the audit of financial statements. So this section is comprised of SAS numbers 122, 125, 128, and 130, but also 135 applies to this section, which was just issued in May of 2019, but it doesn't go into effect until audits periods ending on or after December 15, 2020, and it sits in Appendix B of Section AUC Section 700 until it applies to these audits. So just be aware that that's coming down the pipe in the future, just not yet incorporated into this AUC section. And so this AUC Section 265 addresses our responsibility to appropriately communicate to those charged with governance and management deficiencies in internal control that we identify in the audit of financial statements. And this does not necessarily impose additional responsibilities on us beyond AUC Section 315, where we gain an understanding of the entity and assess risk, or 330, where we perform audit procedures or evaluate the audit's evidence obtained. And so AUC Section 260, as we saw in the prior video series, explains to us the requirements and what we need to communicate to those charged with governance. But this particular AUC section tells us what we need to communicate to management regarding their internal controls and any deficiencies we might have noticed throughout the audit. So as we know, in order for us to identify and assess the risk of material misstatement, we need to gain an understanding of internal controls relevant to the audit. Even if we're not testing internal controls or relying on internal controls, we at least need to gain an understanding of them. And that way we can determine areas that might be susceptible to misstatement, and so we can design our audit procedures accordingly. And throughout that process, we might notice deficiencies in internal control, and that could be in our risk assessment process or at any other stage in the audit. So this section, this AUC Section 265, tells us which of these deficiencies are required to be communicated to those charged with governance and management. And of course, nothing in this section precludes us from communicating any other internal control matters that we think are important. We can certainly inform management and those charged with governance with whatever we feel like is important for them to know beyond the requirements of this section. But if we're performing an audit over internal control over financial reporting that's integrated with an audit of financial statements, this AUC Section 265 doesn't apply because AUC Section 940 tells us what to do in that circumstance. So if you're doing an audit of internal control over financial reporting, you need to jump to 940 and ignore this section. So the objective of all of this is to appropriately communicate to those charged with governance and management deficiencies in internal control that we have identified during the audit and that in the auditor's professional judgment are of sufficient importance to merit their respective attention. And throughout the remaining videos in the series, we'll go through the requirements of what we need to communicate to management regarding their internal controls and deficiencies.